Oh, what's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas here, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, live on the Thomas Take YouTube channel. Obviously, you're joining me live once again on the YouTube channel. Very excited to get started with another episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast that really I'm excited to be joined by a good buddy of mine once again, Samuel White. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, what's going on, Ryan? It's nice to be here again, buddy.
Another episode, another very interesting episode is what is about to take place. Did you check the recent headlines in terms of a Buffalo Bills player known as Shaq Lawson?
Yeah, I did. I was actually a little bit surprised to hear how front and center McDermott was about it. I wasn't expecting to see any clear communication that was so pointed at Lawson.
As far as some of the quotes that you read from this article, which the article was on NFL.com. I'm going to find out actually who wrote the article before I even bring it up. It's probably a good idea. But the headline is Bills GM, quote, Shaq Lawson hasn't lived up to the draft status. It was written by Kevin Patra. And for those of the viewers that didn't read it yet, it says Shaq Lawson enters his third season with mounting pressure, and the Buffalo Bills' former first-round draft pick has heard the trade rumors swirling this spring. Quote, shoot, I've been on the trade block. It's talking about his time in Buffalo, really lived up to full expectations while he's been a member of the Buffalo Bills, which, he says something along the lines of it's been a wake-up call. He's been hearing trade rumors, and then he's kind of realized, hey, I'm a first-round pick, my third year. It's time to wake up. And Brandon Beane said that, he was blunt about his time with Shaq Lawson, saying that Shaq is a guy that this franchise put a lot of stock into with the first-round pick in 2016, obviously. It's no secret he hasn't lived up to that. Sean and I are very frank. We try not to be rude, but we don't beat around the bush. We laid out the expectations for Shaq. I think he's done a really good job to this point, but we have a lot to go. We're off for 5 weeks. What's he going to do in these next 5 weeks? Is he going to take the next step from where he left off, or is he going to regress? That's the conversation we had. I think he wants it. I think he's more focused this year than what I saw last year. The sky is the limit. The guy is talented. It's just what he makes of it and how bad he wants it. It's hard. Some of these guys don't know what it means to be pro every day, and that was part of the thing for him. I think he's now getting that. It's a big summer. Training camp will tell a lot about where his career in Buffalo is headed. That is huge words from Bills GM Brandon Beane. And the article also points out the fact, and I've actually pointed out this fact based on this Buffalo Bills offseason, that the Bills have actually already found a quote-unquote replacement for Shaq Lawson if things don't work out with Trent Murphy. What out of that, blurb there that Brandon Beane shelled out for that interview with Matthew Fairburn of theathletic.com, what does that little blurb tell you as far as Shaq Lawson's status with the Buffalo Bills?
Well, if I were Shaq Lawson, and I think he kind of alludes to it, I think that he feels like the trade is not imminent. Right. I think he feels that the Bills are just disappointed with his progress, and they want him to live up to the natural abilities that he has. The abilities that he was drafted. What was it, 19th or 19th?
19th, I believe. Yeah, I think. Yep.
So that they want to see 19th overall draft player play to that draft spot that he was picked at, and I think they make it pretty clear what they see the problem as. I don't think that they're necessarily concerned with specific plays that he is making on the field. I think they're concerned about his work ethic and not growing fundamentally as a player, and him not taking his job, I guess, for lack of better words. It is his job to keep his body and his knowledge as far as football and his scheme is concerned with him off the field, and to work on it in his own time. So when he does show up for, the training camp and the preseason and the season, that he is more prepared every single time he gets out on that field. And I feel like that the information that being laid out there was basically saying he has to take this game seriously. We need him to play better, and that's going to come from whether he's going to work on this offseason to make his game better.
Right. This essentially, in the words of Brandon Beane, and obviously he alluded to the fact that he's talked with Sean McDermott about it, this is essentially Shaq Lawson's real prove-it off-season, quote-unquote prove-it off-season. So in the likely, just hypothetically, and I think the guy has a realistic shot at making the team. I would definitely say that whether he's a starting defensive end or rotational defensive end, which is often a term that's thrown around in football, if he's a rotational defensive lineman, he has very raw talent. There's a reason why he was picked, as you mentioned, 19th overall. But if he comes into this training camp not as pro-ready as he should be or as he needs to be, what do you think the chances are that he gets traded? And or maybe I think he would get traded. The Bills wouldn't just cut him outright. That would be a big mistake, in my opinion. But let's just say if he's now no longer a Buffalo Bill, what do you see the Bills getting for a player like that, a former first-round pick that didn't really pan out? What would you see Buffalo getting for Shaq Lawson?
Well, to answer the first question, I do think it's very possible, if not reasonable, that if he doesn't show the specifics that were asked of him going into the off season, that he will probably end up on a trading block. I think he was trying to be candid, but at the same time keep a lid on things by the way he answered the question. He knows that there have been rumors, and the rumors have been circulating for a reason. But I would assume, based on the tone of what was said to the media, that the conversation was held to lay out what they expected of him on and off the field before the season starts, and I would assume during the season. So, yes, if he falls short of that at any point in time, obviously we don't know all the things that were asked of him, or specifically, but we can assume that it has to deal with him putting forth an effort that he is going to be a round one player, a top 20 round one player.
Right.
And now you get into the area of, okay, the what if he doesn't pan out and they do have to ship him, what will we expect in return? And that gets so tricky because you're selling raw, someone with raw talent, but who hasn't put up the numbers to support it when healthy.
Right.
Drastically changes what the Bills are going to be able to get in return for him. You might be talking, later in the draft type picks for him,
which I don't deem worth it. It's almost like, granted, he hasn't shown up yet. Granted, he hasn't lived up to his potential. Granted, he hasn't lived up to his draft status. But how worth it is it to trade that guy for little to nothing instead of keeping him? I would keep him. Personally, I don't think he's lived up to his draft status. I don't think he's a flat-out bust. I think he has a lot of potential to achieve. And I wouldn't say that he's been a bust so far, but he's had some injuries. He had the shoulder injury. People really forget this, but when he was drafted, going into that draft, he had a very bad shoulder injury that Buffalo just ignored in taking him. Doug Whaley and Rex Ryan just completely said, well, this guy was a dominant pass rusher. He was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, if I'm not mistaken. Consensus All-American, was one of the most purely athletic pass rushers in the draft class. especially coming off of that 2015 season. I think he had like 13 sacks or 12 sacks or whatever it was, where Clemson was playing in the national championship game. So I'm thinking, you know, they've parted ways with a lot of players. They parted ways with Sammy Watkins. They parted ways with Ronald Darby. Parted ways with, you know, obviously quarterbacks that they've invested in, guys like EJ Manuel and stuff like that in previous seasons. To part ways with another first-round pick that hasn't really panned out yet. Would you say that that's overkill a little bit, or would you say that it's warranted if he doesn't perform?
It depends on what level he doesn't perform to. I would think that if he totally busts, then just shipping him off is just the end of that chapter. But I would say, given the fact that the media was addressed about this in the way that they were, I would say the chances of him being traded are much lower than the sensational headline will make us think.
Right.
Because we didn't have these same conversations when it came to Watkins, right?
Right.
We weren't talking to Watkins saying, hey, this is what we need you to do, yada, 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 because they just didn't see him as a fit. They see Lawson as a fit. And you mentioned rotational. McDermott's team is completely rotational.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how you slice it, they're going to need Trent Murphy.
Right.
No matter how you slice it. So I don't see that being writing on the wall that he's out, but I think that they're letting him know, like, we need you to step up to be where you need to be, and we need to see that you're taking it serious. I mean, he's still young. He's only 3 years in. So he's going to have a lot of his strengths and speed for some time to come. He's going to be less injury prone than someone who's 7 years older than he is. However, they want to see him performing. So I believe that this is more of giving him a glimpse of what could take place if he continues on the path that he's on. And they're trying to wake up and say, hey, man, you got to get up and do something now. And he's saying, I'm dusting off. I'm realizing what I need to do, and I'm applying it. So I don't think there will be a ton of conversation about this. There always is that slim chance that he screws up and doesn't take it serious, and this conversation will continue and escalate. But there's a very real chance right now, given the fact that they've approached it how they have, that he probably has a secure spot as long as he is putting in as long as he's giving the correct effort.
Right. And one of the things that I thought is, okay, like hypothetically, as you said, you know, they're kind of trying to wake him up and say, hey, like even in the article, it was alluded to that they need him to, he has even said, Shaq Lawson has said to himself, it's time for him to wake up and really arrive and make something happen. When we're in training camp and it's July, it's August, you know, preseason, I hope that he is out there with the ones, sharing opportunity with the ones, along with Trent Murphy. Trent Murphy's played linebacker and defensive end, and frankly, you know, he's fairly good at both. But he is even coming off an injury. He is even coming off a ACL tear. He's coming off a bad injury. So in a way, it's kind of like if Shaq Lawson's lining up at defensive end and they're in training camp and Trent Murphy's lining up at linebacker, Shaq Lawson will be lining up across from the second-round pick of last year's draft class, Deion Dawkins, who is presumed to have that left tackle job on lock, you know, on lockdown. If Shaq Lawson we got disconnected? No problem. What I was saying was if Shaq Lawson is you know lined up as a defensive end in training camp and he's lined up against Deion Dawkins and he doesn't perform as well against that second round pick, you can't tell me that GMs don't look at They're teams like that. You can't say that GMs don't look at position, breakdowns and say, well, this guy is getting beat by a 3rd-round pick or a 2nd-round pick. And he was, as you said, not just a 1st-round pick, but a top 20 1st-round pick, the last 1st-round pick in the quote-unquote Rex Ryan era, the only 1st-round pick in the Rex Ryan era, which people are kind of forgetting about that. So I kind of want to call a spade, though, and say that when they drafted him, they knew full well that he had this shoulder injury. When they drafted him, they knew that he would probably miss the first half of his rookie season. When they drafted him, they actually lied to the national and local media and said that he would be back within 3-4 weeks, knowing again that he would be out for the first 8 weeks of the season. So it's almost as if, and I hate to make excuses for the kid, but it's almost as if Shaq Lawson is a product of his past environment, rather than the environment he's in being a product, or rather than being a force in his current environment. He's kind of been like one of those ripple effect players of the Whaley, Rex Ryan era, which if I'm Shaq Lawson, I'm trying to do everything I can to not essentially kiss butt with Sean McDermott or Brandon Beane, but knowing full well that the Bills saw him as a starting defensive end. And you do have some older guys on this defensive line in the defensive end position. Jerry Hughes is getting up there. So this is Shaq Lawson's time to take Jerry Hughes' spot, if anybody. Not so much as compete with Trent Murphy. Trent Murphy will probably be starting along that defensive line along with Shaq Lawson if Shaq Lawson actually makes that leap.
They're looking to future-proof the team. I mean, they have assets that are on the team currently that are going to be pivotal players for years to come. Young stars. And I think that they see the defensive position, defensive end as the same. They know that the older players are going to fall out of ranks, and sometimes quicker than you would like because of their age. The right injury, a neck or something like that at in your 30s. That ends your career. So I think that what they're trying to relate to him is that they know that they may not see him be the best defensive player next year, but I think they want to see his effort support the fact that he does view himself as a dominant defensive end, and that he plans on DB, and he plans on putting his mark on the NFL, because if he doesn't show that hunger on and off the field, then they have to be concerned about whether they worry about moving into a new direction. So I think it's less of a concern on what they're going to get back in return if they do have to trade them. They are more concerned with, if he doesn't perform, we're going to have to find a long-term, replacement for him to fit our scheme. So I think they're trying to work with him for his benefit, but mostly for their own, in order to secure this team for the long term.
I had to switch rooms in the process. I had people outside revving engines and being crazy per usual.
And great background noise.
Right, great background noise for a great podcast. So what I'm about to do is basically show in the background here, right behind my left ear, what is known as the Shiva, which is known as the Shiva in the league. That's the name of their championship trophy in that show, the league. I got my fantasy football championship trophy in the background, so people can know how legit I am at this stuff.
Oh, boy. I'm not even the least bit concerned, Ryan. I'm not the least bit concerned. I have plans for your little league. I feel sorry for anybody that you invited to have a fun time. Because
it's not going to be enjoyable, okay? If you're planning on joking around like the guys on the league, you better tell them the game.
I think it's going to be very enjoyable because the way it broke down, the way people signed up was how the divisions were made. So, like, for every person that signed up in the order that they signed up in, it created the divisions on its own. And you're in one division, I'm in another division. Let's hope that, the divisions, it ends up being you winning Division A, we'll just say, me winning Division B, and me and you meeting in the finals, and we'll see who's the best.
A lot of people are going to take exception with the fact that we are talking hypothetically about us being in the championship before the draft has even taken place. If I were one of them and I'm listening to this podcast right now, I'm blowing up the chat box.
I have made this happen before. I've called my shot and it's happened. So, wasn't in this league, wasn't with these people that will be playing in this league, but it has happened. I've turned a dream into reality. So we'll find out.
You know what? I'm not gonna lie, man. Like, that makes me really, really sad. I feel like it's the dream into reality. Have you ever seen what's that movie you build it and it will come, or whatever?
I apologize to the people that are watching, but I had to change rooms for a second there. So we're getting a little lost here. We're getting stuck on the future of everyone's fantasy fate, which is me ruling the roost, everyone learning that there is a reason why I have this podcast, that I'm legit, and I'm gonna win another ring.
Absolutely, Ryan. I won't argue with that.
So, as far as like other players that you would deem on notice, to me, when I was really thinking of this article, after I read this article, I thought to myself, who is another player that is quote unquote on notice with this current team? I can't think of one outside of Shaq Lawson.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's anybody who's a contributing factor that we would be talking about that would be on the list. I mean, I think that there's people that we will be watching, like a Zay Jones, for instance, to find out where his potential lies. Is he going to be a wide receiver 3? Is he going to function as a solid 2? Does he have the potential to be someone who's taking maybe he's going to play the 2 spot, but he gets enough attempts during the game that he technically would qualify as a 1. I mean, he has that ability. So this year is really going to be, his make or break year as to where he's going to fit, for the next couple of years with the Bills.
Especially when, like, I often do this, when I see a player that didn't really do as well as his draft status, I look at who else Buffalo could have drafted. And Zay Jones was traded up for in that second round of last year's 2017 draft, and Juju Smith-Schuster went much later than he did.
Yes.
In that same round. Actually, I think Juju Smith-Schuster was a 3rd-round pick, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that.
You also have to remember the system that Schuster's playing in.
Right. You got to take into account everything. And, I mean, obviously, I'd much rather catch passes from Big Ben than Tyrod Taylor. And, well,
let's not even go there.
Has he said anything lately again? Has he said anything lately again? Is he?
No.
He's not living in a hole yet.
No, he's staying quiet, and hopefully he's in. I think that based on our conversation before, I think that he's enjoying his team, and he should. And maybe the dose of reality kicked in. He said, I should enjoy this while it lasts, because it's not going to. Or maybe he's still living that, field of dreams fantasy, and
assuming that he's the long-term number one. But as long as he's not talking smack about the Bills, you know, he can be fired up and be, you know, looking forward to meeting them and obviously looking forward to win. He's not a competitor if he says he's, you know, I think the Bills are going to beat us. But, you know, he went a little personal, and I think that he's smart enough that he should realize not to say things like that.
Back to, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to ask me this question, and it's something that I kind of want to nip in the butt before, you know, people, you know, kind of send it to me. One question that everybody has in regards to the current quarterback market or quarterback position at One Bills Drive. You have A.J. McCarron, you have Nate Peterman, you have Josh Allen. Josh Allen, they obviously drafted in the first round of this year's draft. They traded quite a bit to you know, 2 second-round picks to get him. Nate Peterman they picked in the 5th round of 2017's draft, and then A.J. McCarron they signed to a 2-year deal in free agency this year. So within the last 2 years, they've used, you know, some time, invested some time and some picks and some money in their quarterback position. As it stands now, Nate Peterman, I would say OTAs, shirt, shorts, and helmet, you know, drills. We have to, you know, throw that out there first and foremost. It appears as if he is mastering this offense better than any of the quarterbacks that the Bills currently have. A.J. McCarron is in a little bit of a transition with a new team, new colors, new everything. Josh Allen is a rookie, and obviously it was, you know, widely stated that he's got a little bit of a way to go in terms of learning an NFL offense, the speed of the game. I read a quote from a NFL executive, not even someone that is related to the Bills in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
And they said that 5-interception game from Nate Peterman to the former San Diego Chargers, LA Chargers, will always be the San Diego Chargers to me, has changed his preparation, has changed his mindset, really motivated him to be better. It's almost like as if it's public knowledge around the league now that this 5-interception game might have been the best thing to ever happen to Nate Peterman. What say you to that?
Well, I actually mentioned this, I don't know, one of our first casts I joined you on. I am big on people who have that hurdle in front of them where mistakes were made. And I love the fact that he is not worrying about putting that mistake on anyone else's shoulders but his own.
Right.
That's what makes a true leader, okay? Because he has so much he could blame that on. He could go, hey, man, you guys saw my college, so you know what I can do. You saw what you threw me into that game. That was your fault. No, he's taking it personal. So to make it short, I understand why he's using it the way he's using it, and I firmly believe he's going to use it to become better than he probably would have been before. And you have to realize that throughout any conversation around him, that after that debacle of a game, no one was questioning his abilities from the standpoint of, well, he's not accurate, he's not this or that. He threw 5 picks, and that he did.
Right.
All the great qualities that make Nate Peterman, the steal that we got in round 5, are still there. The guy can throw. He can swing that ball, and he's not afraid to put it, you know, right where it needs to be and quickly. Makes a decision, acts on it, and a lot of times they pan out correctly. Unfortunately, in that game, they did not. So I think it was a good thing for him because it gave him that motivation and that resolve to put all this to rest. And I don't think that it's going to be used as a negative. I was fearing that it was going to be one of those things that could have hurt him if he was a lesser man. But I think that at this juncture, he's proven everybody wrong. And it's awesome to hear someone from a different team saying it and not just going, oh, he's looking pretty good. I mean, to be able to say that he's using it as fire, they can see it in his gameplay.
It's one of the. It's just what he is. And people, the way they describe it, they're like, oh well, Nate, definitely has some learning to do. And I'm big on just the press conferences or the little media scrums that they have. His attitude towards the game, towards the coaching staff, towards everything is very positive. I've never, and even after this 5 interception game, his press conference was one of the first things I wanted to see, and I came away thinking he's good. He's a lot better than what people really. He reacted to that adversity. He could have reacted to it in a very pessimistic, blameful, shameful way. But instead he said, well, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to get better. And it appears as if he has. Everything I've seen and heard, it appears as if he has. And we could have a real serious, I mean, people want to laugh it off and say, well, he threw for 5 picks in a game. We could have a real serious quarterback competition on our hands, featuring the ridiculously talented Josh Allen, the X's and O's guy, A.J. McCarron, and a guy that seems like he has tools of his own that he wants to show in Nate Peterman.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, I'm thinking that I date myself. I go back to the past of that game versus the Chargers. I can speak for you too. We talked about it at that point. We wanted to actually see more of Nate Peterman that next week.
Right.
And I kind of wish we would have got to see that. And I know people are like, well, we might not have made the playoffs. We might not have made the playoffs if Nate continued to finish to ride out that season. And there probably would have been a lot of fan outrage, people crying, throwing the race card out there, which we talked about that. Yeah. That was just ridiculous. But what do you think would have happened if you're just looking in your crystal ball, what do you think would have happened had Nate Peterman stayed in there for the rest of the season?
My thoughts on him staying there were less about whether it was going to end the playoff run or not. I wanted to see what the guy could do.
Right.
Because, to be honest with you, the goal in football is to make it to the big game and to win the big game, not to break a playoff drought.
Right.
It's not to get the best player in the draft. It's to be able to get to that game and win it. And I don't care how you did it. That's how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And giving him the opportunity, I mean, knowing that Tyrod's fate was sealed by midseason. I strongly believe that it was sealed by midseason. Not putting him back in there, I think was precautionary, only to ensure that things didn't get so out of control that it would have made it very tough to undo the negative to him. Those are conversations that McDermott would have had with Peterman himself, and I obviously don't know why they made the decision, but I don't think it was swayed by popular opinion. I think that they knew, if they wanted to ensure that they were going to win as many games as possible, and he stuck to his guns. And I think that's something we've given McDermott credit for, is that he's put the person in there who's going to make the best effect at that point in time. I still would have loved the chance to see him a little bit more, but I think that if he was in there, we would have seen the positive qualities, whether we were winning games or not. I think we would have seen more passes completed, far less throwaways, and utilizing the middle of the field a lot more efficiently is what we would have saw during the remainder of the season if he had been in there. But we can't turn back the time to get him in there. So we look at the situation for what it is now and just say, hey, he is one of those guys, like most successful people in general, more specifically successful quarterbacks and other players in this league. He's taking a negative situation and using that to make him a better player. And if you watch all the end of career
documentaries on greats.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost always a time, whether it's a little further along down the line or immediate, that some adversity strikes, some controversy stirs up, and they have to overcome. And they use that fuel to become better than they maybe would have if that never happened to them. So I think it's almost a perfect conversation to be speaking about Shaq Lawson and Peterman on the same cast, because they're both in that same boat where obviously different set of circumstances, but they're both in that situation where they have an opportunity to use some peril that has taken place to make them better people. And I think, on the other side of things, that we have the opportunity potentially to see two people playing great football on the backside of their adversity.
There's a man out there that is well known. He's in the sports circle. He works for CBS Sports. His name's Adam Shine. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I believe I have.
Yeah, he's got glasses. He's got the slick back hair. He has a unique voice and all that fun stuff. But he says things a time or two that are a little bit head scratching. And recently on his show, it was his recent episode of his show, Time to Shine. The host stated that Peterman is, quote, terrible at football, suggesting that the team should start Josh Allen in 2018 and cut Peterman outright. He said, quote, I have a better chance of starting week 1 for the Buffalo Bills than Nathan Peterman. I could not believe my eyes this weekend when I saw a report that Nathan Peterman, who threw 5 interceptions in the first half of his first NFL start, is still in the mix to win the Bills starting quarterback job. Wait, what? I mean, first of all, Mike Rodak, who had this story, is a superb reporter. I have a better chance to start in week 1 for the Buffalo Bills than Peterman. It's not going to happen, mainly because of Nathan Peterman being terrible at football. He went on to say, Josh Allen, he's never thrown a pass in the NFL, and he's already better. This is why they traded up and gave up everything to get Josh Allen. Josh Allen is going to be the week 1 starter. I've been saying that for a long time.
Things wrong with that story.
Right. He went on to say in final, he said, I've been saying that for a long time, and by the way, A.J. McCarron, I'm not a big A.J. McCarron fan at all, but he's better than Nathan Peterman. In theory, if I'm the Buffalo Bills, I keep 2 quarterbacks. Josh Allen is your guy, and you sign McCarron to be the veteran stopgap. He just basically threw complete, dirt, poo, whatever you want to call it, shade.
He threw some shade.
Yeah, just threw just a lot of hatred towards Nathan Peterman. And this goes back to, I want to just throw in my point on this first before I let you kind of interject on it. You could probably match your point with mine a little bit. This goes back to my point, and I talk about this all the time on this show with other Bills fans, and they just don't seem to understand it. We see articles on Facebook, we see articles on Twitter, we see articles on Instagram or videos or memes or whatever it is on Instagram, memes especially, that throw such shade at players in the wake of some adversity that it poisons, and I'm going to say this, poisons the minds of the everyday Buffalo Bills fans. And there's 3 words that I often would hear when I was in school for communications and journalism. Consider the source. Consider the source. Now, I'm not saying that I'm better than a guy that works for ESPN. I'm not saying that I'm better than a guy that works at CBS Sports. But what I am saying is there are very intricate differences between someone that is a national media representative than someone that actually lives, breathes, survives each and every Sunday while being a quote-unquote fan or writer for this team, that national media representatives just do not understand. I guarantee everybody that read that article assumed that Adam Shine watched the post-game press conference where Nate Peterman had bruises all over his face, mind you, on his forehead, on his jaw, on his neck, on his cheeks. Just looked completely mangled. Looked like he was walking down a New York City street and got mugged practically, based upon the fact that the Buffalo Bills offensive line in that Chargers game was vastly shoddy. We'll just say was less than superb. I bet Adam Shine did not know that. I bet Adam Shine also didn't know the fact that their quarterback previously, which he praised in Tyrod Taylor, threw for 57 yards in a game during the season. These things are just not, for whatever reason, and I'm not saying it in a light that makes me better. I'm saying it just on the surface of it being actually what it is. These men and some women that are national media representatives do not understand this team because they don't watch the quote-unquote small market Buffalo Bills as much as they would watch the Monday Night Football Dallas Cowboys or the Monday Night Football New York Giants or the Patriots or the Colts or the Browns. It just doesn't happen. And it really contaminates our fan base when they read stuff like this because they say, well, Adam Shine of CBS Sports said that Nate Peterman's a bum. It doesn't really hold a lot of weight when a national media person says that one of the players on the Buffalo Bills is a quote-unquote bum or quote-unquote terrible at football when they do not represent the team. They do not do their due diligence and watch. And I know that for a fact. What do you say to that? Do you agree? Do you have a different point in that? What are your thoughts?
I obviously agree with you. I think that a lot of the quote-unquote experts, when they chime in, they aren't taking facts into consideration. When somebody who claims to be an expert speaks to the masses, and let's say in this instance, all the fans of the Buffalo Bills are reading this and they start formulating their opinion because they assume that he did his due diligence. And you can, from my standpoint, you can quickly pick out people who have done their due diligence. Why? Because anybody who comes out with absolute statements, they are wrong. Because you hire a group of scouts, you speak to the coaches and the trainers that have worked with this player before you draft them. So you know a heck of a lot about this guy. So to be able to make a statement that he's better than Peterman and that, Allen just walked in, off the street and he's immediately better than Peterman.
It's ridiculous.
It's just a stupid statement because there's nothing to support that. Now, had he come in and said, I watched some tape on this guy, and here's the positives about him. Now, here's where I fear his lack of ability is, and this is why I think he need not make it as a starter on the Bills. I respect that because that's an opinion formulated off of facts. Okay? It's still an opinion.
Right.
It still has a degree of whether he could be right or completely wrong, but it's an opinion that is based off of facts. What he did is just gave an opinion based off of what he's heard, the little that he's seen, and I'm sorry, but you can't form an educated conclusion about something without knowing the facts, If he wanted to be completely honest, he would have first said, hey, listen, I don't know a ton about Peterman, but this is what I think about him. Then at least people will be able to say, well, he doesn't really know what he's talking about, because that would have been the most honest way for him to say an article like that.
That's a guy that what was that?
Go ahead.
Oh, no,
I was going to say that he also mentioned that, we gave away the house for Allen. And that's the absolute untruth. Like, did we trade value to move up? Yeah, because
100%.
they saw value. To get value, you need to replace that with some sort of commodity of value in return. So, yes, we did give away things, but we didn't give away what everybody assumed it even wanted us to give away, to go off and get a
Really wanted us to trade.
Yeah.
Really wanted us to trade.
So if you're looking at the facts, you have to realize that what he's saying is not true. That's a red flag right there. And I'm really big on approaching things in the media the right way. Statements like that are almost everything that he said throws up that red flag that he's looking for shock value. It's a great, bold, brave statement, and it makes you chuckle a little bit because he can get in there and be better. But quite honestly, when you're dealing with fans who don't have the ability to, or I shouldn't say don't have the ability, just don't necessarily have the time probably to do the research that a quote-unquote expert would do before they speak, you're doing them a disservice when you deliver information like this, because you're not giving them a sports education. You're giving them meritless editorial.
And casual football fans just see Adam Shine as a show on CBS Sports, and that's good enough for them. Where someone...
Right, you have to believe him. He's a sports expert. He's an
right.
analyst.
Right.
The only thing he forgot to tell you is he didn't analyze anything before he said it.
To say that Nathan Peterman is terrible at football while sitting behind a desk with a suit on is a little... Yeah. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. I wouldn't go as far to say that about any football player, not even Tyrod Taylor, mind you.
No.
But I wouldn't even say that about Tyrod Taylor.
You have to be honest.
Right.
In order for Tyrod Taylor to even be given the opportunity to play QB1, he has to be to a certain level.
Anyone, a third string offensive lineman, it has to have some sort of athleticism to be a football player. I mean, I
think of walk-ons and things like that. You got your walk-ons, you got your undrafted players. At the end of the day, as little as we talk about those people, they have to be like 95% better than most of us.
Right.
Then to be able to even be in the conversation of making it to the NFL. And let's not forget that a lot of those people that we just mull over, a couple of years later, a lot of these people are household names.
Right.
So if I'm listening to somebody who's going to formulate my opinion, I want them to educate me on what talents this player has and where their fits are, as opposed to just writing them off. Because there's very few players, if any, that I've ever seen in the league that I say they're just trash. We dog Tyrod Taylor. We dog him because I don't think that he's a consistent QB number one, not because he has no value.
Right. Right.
And then, and amongst our joking, we do go back to the fact of his actual value and what he is good at. So even if you dislike a player for whatever reason, you cannot take away their value. That would almost be like you saying that about his job, that he doesn't deserve it, blah blah blah. In order for him to get there, he was doing something right.
Right.
So
right.
He got some talent.
There's no question that certain players have the talent, they just don't have the talent to, and then blank. Like he had the talent, he just didn't have the talent to take us to that next level. It reached its max. But in terms of guys like Adam Shine, guys like, trying to think of some other ones. I know there's Stephen A. Smith, or I'm trying to think of some other ones. It is their best stab at taking or formulating some sort of impersonation of Jim Rome. And at least with Jim Rome, who some people aren't a fan of, some people are, he's being inducted into the Broadcasting Hall of Fame, which is obviously it's a big deal. Anything that is Hall of Fame is a big deal. He's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. He's ruffled thousands of guests' feathers while on his show when he was on Showtime and CBS and ESPN, but he's always been himself. That's actually him. It's not fake. Where this guy is forcing the issue. As you said, clickbait. As you said, you have everyone writing articles about CBS Sports host Adam Shine says Nate Peterman is terrible at football. Why take a stab? You're Adam Shine. You're sitting behind a desk at CBS Sports. You have your own show. Why take a stab at the little guy? And the little guy, meaning Nate Peterman, because he's not the most popular player in the National Football League to get a starting job. You know what I mean? Like if Buffalo gave him the starting job, he's not a guy that oozes, popularity and things like that. He's green. He's a one-year pro. Why go after, in one of the final segments of your show, a one-year pro? And it's because the national media, for whatever reason, they can't stand the Buffalo Bills. And I hate to say it like that. It sounds like it's, us against the world, but they dogged the Bills constantly. They said that they were going to be 4-12 in the USA Today, which Adam Shine was a part of that. That ranking. They were going to be 4-12 in 2007. Enough with looking at a schedule in June or looking at a schedule in April after teams are drafted, and looking at each matchup and saying, "Oh, we'll win this one, we'll lose this one." It's stupid. It's really stupid. I don't like to use that word, but it is. It's a waste of time. And I'm somebody that I like to have constructive conversation for sure. If Adam Shine wants to say that Nate Peterman is a bad football player, he should also mention that you can mention it in a bubble like this, rather than throwing complete shade on one player, saying that this player is a bad football player. If he just said Nate Peterman is the most vanilla quarterback in the room, I would agree with that. There's nothing about him that wows you, but he's good. He has solid intangibles. Josh Allen has eye-opening talent. There's no question about that. And A.J. McCarron is probably the most pro-ready out of the three. That is a logical assessment of the three quarterbacks that they currently have. Not saying one is terrible at football while sitting behind a desk. I wanted to kind of talk about Nate a little bit first, and then just throw that article out there as far as just the complete joke that it is. And
I think you have to be happy that certain people like that aren't running teams, because do you know how many quarterbacks that we would not be talking about as the top 10 quarterbacks in this league if we based it off of horrible years that they had, and not just one game, not just one bad situation, horrible years that they've had. You just don't evaluate people to that degree. It's cool for an article, but realistically, you can't run a business, you can't run a football team with that sort of almost extremist type of viewpoint on players.
It's damning, is what it is. It's like that. There's nothing that Adam Shine could say after that could right that wrong. It's like when you put out a statement like that about one person, it was one of the guys that I really went hard after that is not Tyrod Taylor was Chip Kelly. I deep down believe, I've never met Chip Kelly, and I preface my statements by saying this, I've never met Chip Kelly, but I do not think Chip Kelly is a good person. There's a lot of things that allude to that fact of his coaching experience and things like that he was simply not a good guy. He didn't give fair opportunity based on whatever reasons that there might have been. And realistically, I thought that he was just a joke of a coach that didn't belong in the NFL. And it turned out he was a joke of a coach. He ruffled a lot of feathers. He pissed off a lot of players, LaShawn McCoy included, and ripped apart a Philadelphia Eagles team that, thankfully, for their sake, found a great rebound replacement coach in Doug Peterson. And that is what helped them win the Super Bowl. Not Carson Wentz, not Nick Foles, not that rebound hire of a reeling team from a over his head coach in Chip Kelly. Getting Doug Peterson was what helped them win the Super Bowl. That was the first and foremost thing that helped them win. I think Frank Reich had a little bit to do with it too. Shout out to him as well. Former Buffalo Bill. But, it is what it is. I think that there are a lot of Bills fans out there that they love hearing about their team. and they love hearing about their team, whether it's positive or negative. They're obsessed with getting some sort of news on the Buffalo Bills. It's one of the things that I've made the backbone of the podcast, 100%.
Yeah.
And I've kind of taken full advantage of that, knowing that Bills fans want their news when they want it at their fingertips when they want it. But this contaminates that quote unquote product knowledge that is the Buffalo Bills. When a diehard Buffalo Bills fan sees that Adam Schein of CBS Sports Radio or whatever says these things, it's going to sour the fans on the idea that could turn into reality, that Nate Peterman could be the starter. There is a very good chance that he could be the starter, and people need to realize that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And we know how the fans are in Buffalo, and they've been through a lot, and they're concerned about not wasting more time. And I respect that because, you know, being a fan that's probably older than some of the folks that tune in at times with you, like I've been through it. I know that pain. I watched in my living room with my dad and my brothers, or my brother and my cousins, like the Super Bowl losses. You know, I watched firsthand Wyatt Wright. I understand that. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think what we have to be cautioned about is the fact that because we want to avoid those same pitfalls, it doesn't mean we have to run everybody who has a mistake out of town. And we don't need to make rash decisions, because those rash decisions have ripple effects. Every single player that comes onto our team has a contract, and there's money tied to that contract. There's relationships and chemistry that's created in the locker room. There's the pick that we have to give up in order to obtain these people. So to just X people out and move them on is just absurd. And that's the reason why we look for solid, sensible leaders to ensure that day in and day out they're evaluating the team the way that they need to. And those are the people I want to hear from. And I think I mentioned this before. That's the reason I respect McDermott and Bean so much, is because you get this feeling that they're not resting on their laurels. They're always watching people. They're always evaluating. They're looking at their positives. They're looking at their opportunities, and they're ready to work and make adjustments based on that. So you have to believe that they know what Peterman is capable of and what he's not capable of, and what he's working on and what he's not working on. And they're going to make the right call. If he needs to be on the field because that's the best thing for us, we're going to see that. And regardless of what any ESPN quote-unquote analysis, quote-unquote expert has to say, I'm going to trust the guys who have their boots on the ground.
Right, and guys that actually study this game. Like,
yes.
And you study this team. Study the team like for hours on end. And you mentioned, the Buffalo fans, and I want to mention this, as we wind down a little bit here. Why do you, like, if I were to ask you this one question, why do you think the city of Buffalo loves the Buffalo Bills, the Buffalo Sabres as much as they do? Why would you say that you think that they love these teams?
For me, it's always been the players and the love for the city.
Right. It's the love for the city, I would say, the players, and what I would add to that is the hope, dreams, and belief that this city could at one point be considered a winner. That is to me the idea that each city in this country that has a sports team, whether it's in the NFL, the NHL, the Major League Baseball, NBA, you name it, even in fighting sports, if there's a fighter from here or whatever, that their team, someone that wears their colors, can be a winner. That idea, that waking up that morning and thinking the city of Buffalo is a championship city, That's what gets me going, because Buffalo's the underdog. They're down and out sometimes. They've got back up, got knocked down, got back up as a city and as a region. That if Buffalo were able to get down and get back up again with this team, with this coach, with this GM, it would be as if almost all the frustration, whatever you want to call it, heartbreak, you could throw in there too, was worth it. When that moment happens, the Bills fans will deem, and Sabres fans, Buffalonians will deem it worth it that they went through those experiences, because it led to, bright, sunshiny days in Buffalo. That, to me, is what that means. And when Buffalo Bills fans have this desire to go out and find this news, they also, they meaning the national media, should realize that this is one of the very few things reality should be addressed here. This is one of the very few things that Buffalo, this people of Buffalo actually have.
Yeah.
It is the Buffalo Bills and the Buffalo Sabres. We don't have the ritzy glitzy Malibu, Beverly Hills. We don't have the Texas, football mantra that they have. We don't have the sunshine and the beaches that Florida has. We got food, Bills, and Sabres. And that's really about it. And bad weather. And snow. Yeah. So when I just feel like they don't, the national media just doesn't care enough. They see Buffalo as the little guy. So it's like, well, who really cares about them? They'll tune in about their team no matter what. Where it's like, to me, the Buffaloes, the Clevelands, the Pittsburghs, the Detroits, the Minnesotas are practically the NFL. The reason why the NFL is where it is. Because if the small market teams weren't successful, if back in the day these NFL, commissioners and owners and stuff, AFL owners and the commissioner back then, if they couldn't come to an agreement that, hey, this is successful for us, this is successful for you, why not come together and form one league where it's the mecca of football? If all those cities weren't successful, none of this, we wouldn't even be talking about this right now.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I feel like this small market baloney, that teams are small market, should just be ripped apart and looked at as, this is the NFL. This is the gold standard of football. This is, frankly, whether Roger Goodell wants to admit it or not, as much as he doesn't show in his integrity that his lack of integrity, this is the number one league in all of sports. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
I would agree. It's worldwide.
It's the
mega league.
It's a giant, and most of that is because of the things that Roger Goodell has done, to be quite honest, with branding the league and stuff like that. But if this is the mecca, this is the number one league, every team should get their fair share of good, honest, constructive conversation. And that's my thing. And Bills fans have kind of said, well, who am I to say that? Well, I can say I'm only 26 years old, to date myself, and you dated yourself with your experience with the teams.
Yeah.
To say I'm only 26 years old and I didn't experience those Super Bowl losses like other people did, but to hear people talk about them time and time again as if it's this dark cloud hanging over the franchise, which it still is and it probably always will be until they win one.
Right.
I want to move on from that. As much as I love Jim Kelly, as much as I love Thurman Thomas, I want to have that same love for Josh Allen, Trey White, Shady, and Clay, and all these players that belong here, frankly, just as much as those guys did, if not more, because they're new, they're ready, they're of the present and future, whereas those guys are in the past.
Yeah.
So
it's not a bad thing to look at it like that. We have to have respect for the people who, gave up the time with their family and put their bodies in peril to do this amazing things that they did that to this point have never even been repeated. But we also have to look at it from that standpoint, like, okay, here we are now,
we have the things on our team, and we are in the process of, grooming them in the same fashion as we did in the past. And, we have to trust those people that are there. Like, Jim Kelly is not going to turn back the clock 30 years and come out and play for us.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
As much as it would be great if he, and I'm sure he would be willing, and I'm sure Thurman Thomas.
I'd love to see number 12 out there again, but he knows, we know that it's not going to happen. I'd love to see Bruce Smith, Cornelius Bennett, and Darryl Talley, suit up again and jump on the field. It's just not going to be effective for us. So we have to realize that these players are here, and I'm a firm believer that we just got to love the game for it being the game. But if you're cheering for the team, you gotta love the people on the team. You gotta support them, And as much as their God-given gifts and their work ethic is going to be what helps propel them to greatness, there's nobody who's ever given one of the documentaries or end of the year press conference where they don't say their feelings towards the fans. So if you don't think for a second that your viewpoint and opinion and conversations about those guys that are on the field affect them, you're wrong.
Right.
We have to be willing to stick up for those guys and say, you know what, this is what I'm seeing from Peterman. You know what, I trust what McDermott's doing. You know what, go with it, Bean. And until they give you a reason to disbelieve, I mean, a solid, consistent reason, then you have to, I know it sounds like, just put your head down and do what everybody tells you, but to a certain extent, you do have to trust the people that are put in those positions in until they give you a reason, like Whaley did, to question it. You just roll with it. You try, and my thing that I try to do with the Bills team is I try to figure out why they're making the decisions that they're making, as opposed to telling everyone why I think it's stupid. I try to figure it out.
Right.
I'm not a fan of Tyrod, but when they were choosing to keep them, I was understanding what they were trying to do, and it panned out exactly how it needed to.
Right.
So
the organization now is night and day for the better than it was 2 years ago.
We actually have NFL caliber organization from the business side.
Right, from the top to the bottom. Yeah, from the top to the bottom. There's no doubt, no wavering. There's no, what's the word I'm looking for? No dreading. There's no dysfunction. There's no, even when Ralph Wilson was the owner, and God bless him, because without him, this conversation wouldn't be possible. And that needs to be stated. I don't think he gets enough credit for what he did for the game, to be quite honest. He did a lot more for the game than what people realize. Yeah, for the Bills and for the NFL, for the AFL. AFL-NFL merger, he was on board with it. He was one of the few guys that said this is actually going to be a reality. But even when Ralph was their owner, getting back to the Jim Kelly days, they couldn't reel in the big fish that was Jim Kelly, because it was notoriously known that Ralph was cheap. So and I'm not saying that as a bad thing, but O.J. Simpson in the O.J. 30 for 30 Made in America, the parts that were not about his post-NFL career, parts that were about his NFL career, Ralph Wilson told O.J. Simpson, we're not going to build a championship team. We're going to build a competitive team.
Yeah.
And those were his exact words. And OJ was like, well, I guess I can't go anywhere else. There's no USFL, there's no UFL, there's no the CFL was I don't even know where it was at that point. It was much less than CFL's grown a lot compared to that day. I don't even think it was in full existence yet, like it is now, but there was nowhere else for those guys to go. So that's where he played and made a lot of success on a team that was abysmal. I mean, they were really bad the years that they had O.J. Simpson. The years that they transitioned from that era in the mid-'80s and drafted Bruce Smith, they were one of the first teams in NFL history since the merger to have 2 consecutive seasons where they were 2-14.
Yeah.
They were one of the and for people that don't know it, like you said, there are some younger people out there, but I'm a history buff when it comes to football. They didn't beat the Miami Dolphins throughout the whole 1970s decade.
No, I didn't even know that.
Mind you, that was when they had OJ, one of the best running backs of all time, and they still could not beat Don Shula's Miami Dolphins. They beat Don Shula's Miami Dolphins in 1980 at Rich Stadium at the time. They tore down the field goal posts.
Yep, I remember that.
So for Bills fans to be like, oh, the past, we have these good. I love those guys. I really do. And that they're part of our colors and our culture and everything like that. But we gotta embrace these young dudes. We can't throw shade at Josh Allen. We can't throw shade at Nate Peterman. We can't throw shade at guys like Shaq Lawson, who realistically, if I'm really getting down to brass tacks with that, I feel as if you're doing your team a disservice by letting them go. What are you really generating in terms of a return for a guy that hasn't shown up as a first-round pick yet? I know that they have this no-nonsense mentality where they want to send these guys back, and if they don't perform, but it's not like the guy's Marcel Darius. I think he actually cares about the team, and furthermore, he's not willing to eat himself to become 360, 370 pounds. We also throw that in there.
Like I said, I don't think we're having this conversation about him, and I don't think that they're having that conversation about him because they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think that this is just part of the process of getting him to where he needs to be.
And I never saw that with guys like Aaron Maben. I never saw that with guys like Josh Reed, who they drafted, wide receiver that was a Biletnikoff Award winner out of LSU, that was the nation's top wide receiver in the wide receiver class in college, that really turned out to be a wide receiver 4 at best while playing in a wide receiver 3 role. And they never talked about, oh, we got to tap into Josh Reed. We got to tap into Aaron Maben. We got to tap into what it is psychologically that is not getting him on the right track. They're doing that with Shaq Lawson. So I'm excited, man. I think that all the stuff we talked about today was very, very constructive, and I hope the people that tuned in thought it was too, because guys like Adam Shine that throw shade at the Bills, guys like there's been so many. I mean, even in the NFL Network segment with Tyrod Taylor, where they're showing him throw 2-yard dump off passes, that Andrew Sakalopoulos or whatever the heck his last name is, I can't even pronounce it. He's like, "Are you mad at the Buffalo Bills? Do you want to get back at the Bills?" The media thinks that it was a mistake.
Yeah,
they think it was a mistake that they let him go. Where they thought it was a mistake that they let Sammy go. They thought it was a mistake they let Darby go. They were proven wrong.
Not too upset about those. I'm not too upset at all.
Not too upset either. So Sammy Watkins is playing on his 3rd franchise. Ronald Darby was horrible in the Super Bowl. One of the worst players on that Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl winning team. Yeah. In that game.
And Stephon Gilmore had his moments.
Oh my God. I forgot about Stephon Gilmore.
Yeah. He had his moments where he did things, but it wasn't the fact that he could not make plays, but it's about consistency. Like, if you can make 2 great, phenomenal, beautiful, stretched out breakups in a game, but you let 4 or 5 that should have been broken up go, are you really doing your job?
No. And
give me consistent vanilla.
Right. A terrible tackler.
Yeah. Atrocious
tackler. Leotis McKelvin, who they trotted out for 8 years, which is really hard to believe. They trotted him out for 8 years. He did have his moments. I don't want to say he was a complete bum like Adam Shine. He had his moments of showing some promise. But as we're talking about Shaq Lawson, Leotis McKelvin was a top 15 overall pick that they never really seemed to tap into what it was that made him the player that he wasn't. They never did. I don't know what they changed schemes a lot, enough, more times than you could, more times than the days in the week, to be quite honest. But I feel like these past players that haven't worked out should not be put in with the future players. Like fans say, well, Shaq Lawson, he's another Buffalo Bills bust. I'm not willing to go there. I'm just not.
You use Chip Kelly as a really good example. A lot of times it's the people that you're working with that are in control of bringing everything together that really get the players where they need to be. Players have to feel a certain feel, and they have to be prepped in a certain way, and otherwise you're wasting talent. So you can't just look at the players and point the fingers at the players, and I think that Peterman is a really good example of that. The things that were going on when he was put into the game did not work in his favor. At the end of the day, some of the best minds in football realize that. Mm-hmm. If you take a surface look at it, he threw 5 picks. He's garbage. If you take a analytical, frame by frame view of it, you start looking at it like, first of all, this guy did some positive things in the game that was an utter disaster from the get-go. And the things that did go incorrectly, you cannot sit there and put the blame solely on his shoulders. A lot of them, I would say, were not on his shoulders at all. So you have to be able to look at things for the bigger picture and what they actually are. And if we're going to be a team that wants to just look at the cool topics and act on that, then we might as well write the championship out of our future. If we want to be a championship team, we need a core of players, we need a core of coaches, we need a core of trainers, and a nice solid development team, and that's how you win a championship. And we can't have armchair quarterbacks,
right,
trying to run the team, because it's just not going to happen. So I mean, it's cool. I respect where they're coming from. I respect why they do it. And I've done it. I'm sure I've done the same, myself. But it's getting to the point where it's like the masses are thinking really goofy thoughts, and it's all fueled off of misinformation that comes from people who are either misinformed or not informed at all.
Right. When you're talking about Nate Peterman's performance, the first thing I thought of when I watched that game, and I've never said this, and I'm gonna say it. I don't give a rat's what anyone thinks when I say it. But one of the things that I thought, brace yourself, but
okay,
what was the difference between Nate Peterman's performance in a week 8 game versus the San Diego Chargers or Los Angeles Chargers, Chargers. What was the difference in that game compared to Jim Kelly's Super Bowl 27 performance?
You have to take me back there. That's been a while.
That both what I'm alluding to with those two games is that both games were easily categorized as a snowball effect game, where you could have had transplanted Joe Montana and Jerry Rice on those teams, and if the same events occurred, it wouldn't have changed a thing.
Right.
You can't change what was reality and say, well, this guy was so bad. When I talked about it earlier, the reality was that game was a massive snowball effect game waiting to happen. And the Bills thought that they could kind of throw him to the wolves and see what he could do. But they realized quickly that the matchup was a disaster for that team against the other team. And that was
not just the matchup, the whole chemistry of the team was shaken.
Right.
It was shaken. We could have been playing the worst team in the NFL, and quite honestly, we would have had some troubles because no one was on the same page. And a lot of players were, pulling the Brian O'Reilly, checking out, and you know, there wasn't a flow to the game. So you know, it's just goofy to try to put it on. Yeah, I know, Ryan O'Reilly, but yeah, it's goofy to put it on Peterman, and you know, it shows people's knowledge of the events that happen around Buffalo, and what was happening to the team at the time. It shows their level of knowledge when they speak about the game as just a massive quarterback failure.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it than that. And
there's no offense to people for saying it. I understand, but you know, you got to dig deeper if you really want to know what you're talking about. And there was a whole lot more to talk about.
Remember the time I was telling you about that buddy of my buddy that I don't really know that well, but we were debating about sports.
Yes.
They were talking, this other guy joined in, and then another guy joined in. We were talking about the Super Bowl, this past year's Super Bowl. And they were saying that Tom Brady choked. And, you know, I do have a little bit of Brady love. There is no doubt about it. He's won me a lot of fantasy football championships. And he is one of the best ever. He's the best quarterback I've ever watched, period. Me personally, he's the best. So when people say that he choked, that is just such a and I was happy that they lost. Don't get me wrong on that end. I wanted Philly to win very badly. But to say that he choked, it is an insult to my intelligence. To say that he choked when they were winning that game 33-32 with the football, and he was sacked and fumbled. He was sacked by a much, much larger man, or two much, much larger men than him, that caused him to fumble that ball. So to say he choked, it's just that it's like some of the logic with some of the fans that are out there. It's just, I don't understand it. I really don't. And it's almost like they say things based on what they want to see. They want to see Tom Brady have this 5-interception game where everything goes wrong, where in reality, that happened one time and it's never happened again. It happened one time.
I don't even think it's a matter of what people want. I think it's just a culture that we've come into when it comes to anything media related. You take everything to an extreme. You know, just look at the headlines on Facebook and YouTube, and that everything is, you'll never see anything like this again. Massive choke, massive fail, epic this, epic. And so everything is this, everything's worst case scenario or best case scenario. You know, someone does great and they're the most awesome thing ever, and someone did bad, that was the worst thing I've ever seen. Realistic people see beyond those lines and go, the game happening the way that it happened was a mixed result of some coaching, positive and negative, depending on what team you're looking at. Just fantastic players on both sides of the ball. Just one team happened to be a little more fantastic. They tied their fantastic shoes on a little tighter than the other team. But to put that on Brady as if he had this, monstrous nosedive of a game is just insane. And you could pick apart that to support anybody having the best game ever or the worst game ever. But when you watch everything together, you have to be real and say, hey, the better team won because they played harder, but the other team played their heart out.
And the Super Bowl is so opportunistic. Like, as far as it's one game, you have one game to either win or lose a championship. It's a champion, one game. What I mean by that is, one thing goes wrong in the early onset of a game, it could cripple a team. It could ruin the momentum of a team. The first snap of the Denver-Seattle Super Bowl was a wide snap that rolled into the back of the end zone for a safety. I mean, there's things that happen in these Super Bowls, especially in this millennium, that have just blown me away, that have drastically changed the games. The Saints versus the Colts, they did an onside kick at halftime. I mean, that was who would have and this most recent one with the Eagles, Doug Peterson literally said, we played this game as if it was one game where we did whatever it took to win. We were going to go for it on fourth down. We're going to take chances. And if they don't pan out, we're going to lose as if it's one game and win as if it's one game.
Yeah.
And that's the mentality that every coach should have that is coaching in a Super Bowl. Jimmy Johnson, and I hate to say this, but Jimmy Johnson won both of his Super Bowls with Dallas against Buffalo and said something to the effect of, if we force them to play fast, we're not forcing them to play at their strength. We're turning their strength against them.
Right.
Where if we play them to their strength and turn it against them, if we play just as fast as they do on defense, we will create turnovers. And they did. They literally drilled creating turnovers. They literally drilled stripping the ball. They drilled the checkdowns that Jim Kelly would make when he would call his own plays. There was like very minute things that these teams did to beat each other in these games that not many people know about. And that's something that I think that is fascinating from like a coaching standpoint and from a fandom standpoint, to be like, hey, I went to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which everybody that is watching this or that will watch this should go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, because there's so much more there than just jerseys and stuff. One of the first things I saw, Samuel, was ridiculously awesome. It actually gave me chills reading it. It was a note card slide where there were like binder rings in it, and it was laminated. It was note card slides written by Bill Belichick when he was the defensive coordinator for the Giants in Super Bowl 25 against our Buffalo Bills.
Wow.
He had the game plan down to a T. It was, do not let Jim Kelly throw over the middle. Do not let them run the no-huddle offense. Force Jim Kelly to check down to Thurman Thomas. And that's what they did.
Wow.
The whole game. It was executed to a T. They had 3 down defensive linemen. They spread their defense out. When Jim Kelly would drop back, he would have just a sea of blue jerseys draped over the white jerseys that they were wearing for that game. It was and I hate to say it for obvious reasons, but it was the perfect strategy. There was no combating that. But I really think that Bills fans are doing themselves a disservice by buying. I mean, I saw this, and the reason why I'm referring to this, and I forgot to mention it, this was on a Bills fan site. This was on BillsWire.usatoday.com. It's a sub Bills fan site of USA Today. They do a really good job. They have a lot of really good writers, some of which I know. This writer, though, Kyle Salagi, is someone I do not know. But this was a great article. He even combated Adam Shine's point by saying it was a huge stretch, which I'm thankful that he actually had the guts to write that. But there are some articles out there that just slam the Bills on Bills fan sites. I've never understood that. I don't get it. I mean, they're not supposed to be biased. They're supposed to be but just to slam the team in moments where
biased with the facts.
Right.
Biased with the facts, you know.
And be constructive rather than criticize. So you know. But hey, buddy, thanks for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate it, and I hope to have you on again sometime. We gotta make a deal and do a draft recap on the Sabres.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun. I can't wait.
So, what do you think the percentage is that they don't take Rasmus Dahlin?
0.00.
What is the percent that Ryan O'Reilly gets traded?
If you're asking from my standpoint, 152%. I think realistically, there's probably about an 80% chance. I don't think that there's any reason that they're not going to trade him, you know. But we mentioned, you know, to keep with the theme of being straightforward and honest about people. You know, he has talent.
Right.
When he plays, he's one of the better forwards in the league. He can put up points and he can play hard. My fear is, did he do too much damage with his attitude
and his representation of the Bills as Sabres as a Sabre player. And I think, from my standpoint, being on the outside, I'm not privy to the conversations. He has done too much, and they could get a premium player in free agency for, just a little bit over what they're paying him, and almost guarantee have a fresh start number one, with a player that's primed and ready to go, with some new weapons on the ice, with a fresh outlook, and I think, those things have to be taken into consideration. But from my standpoint, they are holding on to him, hopefully not to seem overly anxious to dump him, so that they get, a fair trade back in return.
I was on the podcast audio-wise, and I sent you the link to it. I'm not sure if you
started watching it.
Oh, you did what? You did watch it, or you hadn't watched it yet?
I started watching it, but then my daughter,
Oh, yeah, I know that. I know how that is. But not that I have one of my own, not yet. But I've had cousins and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, but in that podcast, I'm gonna just throw it out there and kind of spoil the fun. So in that podcast, it was audio. I was doing it audio. It wasn't live on YouTube like I am now, visually and everything. But I talked about just envision this. Close your eyes and envision you open your eyes and you're in a locker room where it's the day after the season is over, a day after a season with so much promise was left in complete and total shambles. Once again, this is not something that's new to Buffalo Sabres fans, to Buffalo Sabres players. The fact that this is a reality, that the Sabres season has ended in shambles year after year after year. They haven't made the playoffs in almost 8 years, which is ridiculous or 7 or 8 years. When I think of that, it's just, it's insane. But Ryan O'Reilly on locker cleanout day, the funeral of the Buffalo Sabres season this year, comes out and says that he doesn't know if he likes hockey. Yeah. I think it's a really, really hard sell to bring him back. That's a guy that I talked about how Shaq Lawson, I don't want to trade him for nothing. I'd be willing to give Ryan O'Reilly away for a bag of pucks that we could use at practice. And I'm saying that I do not want that on these teams. As a fan, it infuriated me. As a writer and whatever you want to call it, podcast guy, I jumped on him like a fly on a turd. But at the same time, why would any Buffalo Sabres fan truly endorse him being on this team?
Right.
For what?
And to me, he doesn't talk like a fantastic teammate. Like, I would think that his conversations would be more like, we've got players on this team that can do it, and we're just not putting it together. Me and Jack and so and so and so and so really need to get on the same page. And create that atmosphere of this being a full team working for each other. Right. In order to achieve a goal, because that's what we need. These aren't a bunch of individual players that we pick together for a couple months every year and try to make a run at something. I mean, this especially in Buffalo, it's a family.
We hear about it we hear about it every year about how talented they are. He's got all the talent in the world surrounding him, and it's like he has a personality of a wet sponge. It's really, I don't think he's going to be traded. And that is why I am very, very frustrated, because if I'm Jason Bottrill, fans, the team somewhat wanted Evander Kane gone. The team wanted Evander Kane gone. Coaches didn't think he was a fit. There were a lot of extracurricular reasons as to why Evander Kane was traded. There is every reason on the ice as to why Ryan O'Reilly should be traded, and every reason on the ice that Evander Kane shouldn't have been traded. Yeah. So if we're going to take it that way, then there is some real reason to pause for concern. If Jason Bottrill goes through this draft with the #1 pick and gets Rasmus Dahlin, and that's it, I'm a little bit frustrated. I have to say it. I hate to be a Debbie Downer like Jerry Sullivan, but I will say,
I saw that one coming.
I will say, I hate to be a Debbie Downer like Jerry, but I will be a little bit upset if they come away with just Rasmus Dahlin and that's it. That is a failure to me, because you mentioned
I would agree.
You mentioned how Ryan O'Reilly could return, could net us a player that could be a key contributor, free agent. Ryan O'Reilly could also net us a pick in this draft in the first round that could net them another young franchise-changing player who I would much rather, if this team is all in on long term. There was a lot of reports today that Robin Lehner is going to be out of the building soon, probably to open up the crease, pun intended, for Linus Ullmark. That needs to be the vision of this team long term. Who are the cancers and who are not?
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna get rid of perceived cancer and Evander Kane, solely, I think, because of issues with coaches and off ice. If you're going to get rid of that cancer that is actually putting up numbers and has the ability to play hard, he played hard in games where no one else had wheels.
Right.
If you're going to be willing to get rid of him because of those reasons, then you'd almost have to get rid of someone who's been a non-factor, who has claimed to have lost their passion for the game.
Right.
I believe that they will. I hope that they will. And I share your sentiment when I would say I would be disappointed if they walked away with him still on the roster and with no other major changes. I would be slightly defeated. I don't think I'd be down on the team, but I would feel slightly defeated.
I would feel like someone I would feel robbed a little bit. I would feel you're wondering why this team doesn't have leadership. You're wondering, like the fans, they're actually wondering why this team doesn't have leadership. And then on the quote unquote, in my words, the funeral of the regular season for any team that doesn't make the playoffs, locker clean out day. When you got to clean your locker before all the other teams do, that are in the playoffs. And this guy says that he doesn't know if he loves hockey while getting paid, mind you, $7.5 million. I can name a lot of things that $7.5 million could go to rather than a guy that doesn't appreciate it.
And you also have to take into consideration the role that he had was sort of a grooming for Jack Eichel.
Right.
He's a vet. He's supposed to be teaching this young player who's going to be the face of this franchise for, another decade. And he's supposed to be grooming him. Now, what exactly are you teaching him except for do the exact opposite of what I'm doing right now?
Right.
He should be teaching him that when things go bad, you're the one who says, "Hey guys, this is what's going on. This is what we got to do. Here's the standings, and we know we're not making the playoffs. We know this is not happening. We know that's not happening. Ready for ending out this year the best we can and getting ready for next year. That's what a leader does." Okay, and if you have a problem where you're losing that deal, because I don't think that he's being dishonest, and I think a lot of other players have been in that position before, but you better speak those words under your pillow at night.
Right.
And wake up the next day with a big smile and ready to work harder than everybody else, because that's what winners do. Winners don't fail because things are failing around them. Winners get better when things are failing around them. And
that's a good quote. I like that. That was top notch.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that I live by, man.
Right.
It doesn't make a difference what the heck is happening. You put on that big smile. I mean, I do it for my kids when money's tight with the business and everything. That's okay.
Right.
Because we're going to win this. And then put on that smile, and we function like we're supposed to. So, he's showing the inability to lift this team up. And the most critical phase for a team like the Sabres right now, when you are bringing in so many young assets,
is that you need a veteran presence that is going to be able to mold those players into what you need them to be in the future. If you have a veteran that's not the shining example and they're not putting up points, I think it's a no-brainer.
I think
especially when they can get collateral for them.
Right. I think he's rubbed off wrong on Jack. I think he's rubbed off wrong on Kyle Poso. And I think he's rubbed off wrong on the fan base. And really these guys, Bottrill and Housley, want to keep their job. The easiest way for them to keep their job is to actually listen to the fans. In this case, they need to listen to the fans. They have to get rid of them because
you know what? I think that O'Reilly is a pivotal piece in that locker room for the positive or negative. And I honestly feel like Evander Kane is more of like a TO of football.
Well,
he's not going to not going to a locker room and be the guy. You know what I mean? He's going to be the guy who says something jerky and throws something, and everybody's like, why is he doing that? But he's going to go out there and play that same way too.
Right.
And you need that.
You do. You need one guy, just one guy, not two, at least one guy that, you know what it is with Evander Kane that I see? I see Evander Kane as a guy that can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and still show up. That's what I see. I saw a dude that, one of the most eligible bachelors in Buffalo, let's be honest. A dude that enjoys the nightlife, as does a lot of people. I would often say myself, you know, I've enjoyed the nightlife a time or two. Who hasn't in the early 20s? That's the point. And he wanted to go out, do his own thing, whatever. But the team didn't like seeing a guy going out and doing his own thing while being successful. He wasn't slumping. There wasn't a time where I saw Evander Kane play lazy. I never saw that. I saw Evander Kane play hard almost every night while doing whatever he wanted to do. Like
all of our conversations about the games when the few that I did dust off and watch, it was always talking about Oposo and Riley and how they looked. And it was like, but Kane was out there hustling his butt off. And he wasn't always scoring. Even the times when we barely put up any goals, he was hustling. He was working for the puck. He was, getting back on defense. I mean, he was playing. So I didn't mind if he stayed. As a matter of fact, I was a total
supporter,
supporter of him being back on the ice next year. Because I think that giving players that certain edge is necessary in order for them to compete at that level. You got to have a little bit of a chip. You want to be able to learn that, and that's the kind of player you learn it from.
If they're trying to say sharpen your sword, Sabres fans, we're back. The Sabres are coming, and they bring this guy out onto the forefront and is in a season ticket calendar with his picture in a Sabres jersey. I'm sorry. It makes me sick. Frankly, it makes me just think of that too. Like there are times where they got to market to their fans. Obviously, they have a slogan. Like one season it'll be "Sharpen your swords" or "Let's go Buffalo, be there," or whatever. And if they feature Ryan O'Reilly in that, it's kind of like featuring Jay Cutler in a Chicago Bears when he was playing for the Chicago Bears. It's the same thing.
Right.
It's the same thing. It's like featuring Jay Cutler when he was getting a starting job for the Miami Dolphins. Do you think Dolphins fans were excited about that?
All right.
They were not excited about that. They didn't want to see him play. They never thought there was a snowball's chance in hell that he would play in the NFL that season. And I know it's a different sport, but it's the same principle. You have a guy that is as boring as a blank sheet of paper that has no personality whatsoever, no drive, no competitive juice. There's nothing. It's just like, and I've never seen anything like it with a Sabres player. I've never, the days of Ray, May, and Barnaby and Pekka and all those dudes that they were the quote unquote hardest working team in hockey. What happened to that? What?
Yeah.
What happened to that?
Oh, man, you're talking my team, man. Those are my boys.
Right. Jay McKee? Jay McKee was a...
Max Senegalos.
Right. I mean, obviously, like the Jury Briere, all those dudes are superstars. Vanek on those teams was a superstar. But once those guys were gone, they fell off. And that it's like Ryan O'Reilly would need the I'm trying to think of it, the Edmonton Oilers with Gretzky and Messier, and he'd be like a fourth line winger or center in order to have any sort of energy. It's just really, really I would really hope that he's gone. I would really hope.
Agreement with you.
Well, we got a big weekend. I mean, this is a big one. This is Jason Bottrell's first. Is this his first draft? No, this is his second draft, right?
Second. No.
Is it?
Was he here last year?
I think he was here last year because they took Middlestat. Yeah, they took. Did they take?
This is his first big one.
His first big one.
This is his first mark on this team.
Right.
Like where he understands the ins and outs, and he has a chance to put us on the map.
And I like him. I hope he does.
Yeah.
Hope he does.
I really hope so.
Well, dude.
Cheers to the weekend, man.
Cheers to the weekend, and thanks for joining me, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Woo! Hour and 47 minutes with Samuel White. So, you know. Oh, you just gotta let him go. You just gotta. That's really the way that I see it. I see it as I'd be highly disappointed if they bring him back. And we talked about a lot of stuff there. We talked about Shaq Lawson. We talked about the Bills fan base. We talked about the Buffalo fan base in general. How sometimes this team, this city, is so in love with these teams, there's no doubt about it, that they fall victim to too much coverage, or they fall victim to mainstream coverage of these teams, where I'm a dude that I'm going to listen to people that I trust and go from there. I'm Ryan Thomas. This show was originally supposed to be 20 minutes long, and it ended up an hour and 50 minutes. It's the magic of the Thomas Take. Take care, everybody. Let's go Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo.